But then we had some big news dropping. I think it was yesterday, right? This is according to a report from WrestleVotes Radio, and I quote, "Starting on January 3rd, SmackDown will indeed shift to 3 hours." So we're going to get a 3-hour SmackDown on USA every Friday starting January 3rd when Raw moves to Netflix. It goes on to say that the other big news here is the rumor that once the show ends, it will be available on Netflix, which we haven't heard elsewhere. Those are the internal talkings right now, that probably the next day after SmackDown airs, it will be visible on Netflix. Also, there's some news on WWE Peacock from PW Insider this week that says the WWE Peacock deal expires in February of 2026. And the expectation that as NXT and WWE Raw migrate elsewhere, CW and Netflix, the archives of those stories will leave Peacock. So when NXT moves to CW on October 1st, apparently there's going to be no more NXT stuff on Peacock. When Raw goes to Netflix in January, all of the Raw stuff will be off of Peacock as well. So you won't be able to access it there anymore. You're probably going to have to go to Netflix for Raw and the CW app for NXT. I still think that even though you might be on various networks or streaming platforms or whatnot, there still really needs to be a one-stop shop, I believe, for everything. And they're starting to spread that out now. So Peacock currently is our one-stop shop, but that deal is up in February of 2026. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if WWE might move all of their shit to Netflix. We might be doing our classic Sunday night watch-alongs streaming on Netflix in about a year or so. We're going to have to wait. But I feel like if that deal is expiring in February of 2026 with Peacock, they're probably not going to stay with Peacock. They're going to move elsewhere and maybe find another streaming platform. But I think, if you have to go to Netflix for Raw, CW for NXT, and then Peacock for everything else, that's too much. I just feel like one place would be way easier for the fans. And AEW, if they get their deal worked out with Max and they can stream their pay-per-views there, I'm hoping that will include all of the previous pay-per-views. Kind of how Peacock has it set up with WWE, where you can watch even from WCW, you can watch WCW, ECW, WWE pay-per-views, all of them. So I'm hoping that not only will the pay-per-views be available on Max, but the backlog of pay-per-views will also be available on Max. And that would make it much easier for a wrestling fan to navigate, especially if the pay-per-view deal on Max included the Ring of Honor library, maybe even the Dynamite library. We got 5 years of Dynamite. In 6 months, Dynamite is going to outlive Nitro. Think about that. So there's a lot of Dynamites out there. I would love to get the backlog of Dynamites, have that entire Dynamite library available to us, all the pay-per-views, basically everything. So when we hear these rumblings and rumors of a streaming deal on Max for AEW's pay-per-views, great, but I hope that includes everything else. Just put our whole damn catalog on that app and pay us for it, because I would like to have that stuff accessible to me, where I can pull up any Dynamite, any pay-per-view at any time and watch it. That would be helpful to a fan like me, and I'm sure to a lot of you guys as well. So it's weird. It's stuff that we always have to keep our eye on, because both companies are making a lot of moves, and WWE, even though AEW is about to sign their new shit, but WWE has already signed their stuff, and now they're moving into the transition period of moving from network to network. And the business is kind of like a dryer right now, or a washing machine. Everything's just kind of but eventually it's going to get by the time we get 2025, by the time February of 2025 gets here, things will settle down. We'll know where everything's at. But then we're going to have another issue a year later when WWE's probably going to move their streaming off of Peacock somewhere else, since some of it's already going to leave Peacock with this latest rounds of deals. So a lot going on in that regard, but it's been fun to kind of watch this. Now, in terms of SmackDown going to 3 hours, that was a big topic of conversation too. SmackDown going to 3 hours. I have not seen one person that's been happy about this. And I agree. I don't think they should do it, but there is one, kind of silver lining, and is in that it makes both shows equal, really, for the first time. Because when they've been trying to do this brand split ever since 2016, hasn't always been like Raw 3 hours, because Raw's been 3 hours for 12 years now, right? When did they go to 3 hours officially? 2012 or something? So it feels like they've had 12 years of 3 hour Raws. So in that time, SmackDown has always been the inferior show because it's been 2 hours. prior to that, when both shows were 2 hours, I still feel like Raw was very much the A show. SmackDown was switching nights a lot, switching networks a lot, UPN, CW, your grandmama's network, all those different places that it landed on. A lot of times it was taped, and it just felt like the B show. So now if SmackDown goes to 3 hours, I understand that is a lot of wrestling for a lot of fans, and I question whether or not it's very smart to risk oversaturating your shit when things are going so great. Right now, WWE's on top of the world, ratings, attendance, interest. Everything has just been through the roof ever since Vince McMahon got his ass out of there. Everything's been very, very good. So, watering down, oversaturating, flooding the market with too much wrestling, is that really what you want to do? But the silver lining in my head is saying, well, okay, at least now you have two shows that should, in theory, be exactly equal. One's on the USA Network, and the SmackDown, a USA Network relationship that goes back with WWE 40 plus years. And then you have WWE Raw on Netflix, big industry changing moment there. WWE Raw, that's been on cable TV for 32 years, is now going to be moving to Netflix, to a streaming platform. That's crazy. All of these deals lining up these shows make them kind of, or at least Raw and SmackDown, kind of equal for the first time. So right now, SmackDown does not have the roster to support a 3-hour show. But the draft isn't until after WrestleMania. We'll move up the draft. You don't really want to do that because you kind of by now, Triple H has got WrestleMania in his head, and he probably knows the general direction of where he wants to go with at least the top talent. If you hold a draft prior to that, you'd essentially have to do it right now. Because if you hold a draft in January or February, that's on the road to WrestleMania. You're not going to do that. It's a terrible place to hold a draft. So I don't feel like SmackDown is going to be able, the roster on SmackDown is going to be able to sustain a 3-hour show unless you try to even out the rosters a little earlier. So I'm hoping they're going to run some sort of an angle where Aldis and Pierce make some trades or something, or they do something, maybe even like a supplemental draft or something to give SmackDown a little bit extra. Otherwise, you're going to have to wait until your post-WrestleMania draft, and I just don't know how SmackDown can survive a 3-hour show for 4 months, maybe more, on that roster without things evening out. So they might have to do something. They might have to create some shit. I mean, if we get that War Games at Survivor Series, if we are still going to get some sort of a version of the old bloodline versus Roman and Jey Uso and Jimmy and Sammy and all of that, one way to start getting SmackDown's roster beefed up a little bit more would be, I think, to move Sammy and Jey over there. So if you put Sammy and Jey over there, that's two major stars you've got over there now. SmackDown needs some heels, though. Orton and Owens, I think, both turning heel, adding Jey and Sammy to the roster. So now you got two more, main eventers essentially in Jey and Sammy. Jimmy will probably be back by then. Roman, of course, is back. We'll probably see the Wise Man back. And if you got a fresh heel in Kevin Owens, a fresh heel in Randy Orton, possibly even a returning AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura, where the hell are they, by the way? You could have a roster, I think, that could be theoretically strong enough to make it until you get to that draft. Then once you have the draft, then that's your time creatively, your chance creatively to really even out those rosters. Then you can do the draft, then get together behind the scenes, decide who's all going to be on which show, and then do the draft, and then everything's going to be even Steven. But until then, I think you need to figure out some sort of storyline way to add a couple of more big stars to SmackDown. And I think you have the opportunity to do that storyline-wise with what's going to be happening with War Games. So we will see. But SmackDown going to 3 hours, it's right now being universally shit on. I haven't seen one person. I think I'm the only person that's even come close to defending it, because I'm not looking forward to having to write down 3 hours of SmackDown notes before my wingy on Saturdays. It sucks. So, especially if a lot of it's filler and whatnot. But then again, you never know. This might, this keeps WWE on cable TV for 3 hours. They'd still have a 3-hour show on cable TV because, one thing you have to think about, or at least consider, Raw could look very different on Netflix. They might be going for a whole new look here, or a whole new concept. We don't even know yet. So keeping that, 3-hour WWE show as we know it on USA Network, is, kind of that, link to normalcy, I suppose. But I'm going to give it time. The wrestling world is changing right before our very eyes.